disappointment. Be a disappointment. Remember to be a disappointment, y'all. Remember that the story that you have about disappointment, the very story about it, the way you define it, is yours. Who are you disappointing? Who could you disappoint? How and why? Raise your hand if you're someone kind of like me. I was raised under, I was given, like I've said this several times on this show, I was firstborn son, a lot of responsibilities early on, and I adopted an identity of perfectionism. I adopted an identity of reliability. I was a strong kid, the strong son, the strong friend. I would show up for people. I held space for people emotionally. I was able to be there for people. And I did that reliably. And I identified as such, as the helper. I was there for people when they needed to move. Motherfuckers needed to move across town in DC. I'd show up ready to pick up sofas and help get through tiny spaces and cracks in the freaking staircase and shit. And I would sweat and be there, and I'd take pride in that. And I liked that. And my friends liked me for that. It was a part of my identity. It's part of how I viewed myself. And at first glance, these are good things. I'm proud of that. I'm glad that I was kind of that person. I built that, and people, I think generally most people will agree. If you ask someone who knows me, who's known me different points in my life, I take pride in being there for people, and I was reliable. My identity included that. My identity included my ability to hit accomplishments. I would say to someone that I would do something or that I could do something, and then I would accomplish it. Reliable, consistent. Played football in high school and college, captains of both teams. I was a leader. I stepped up and tried to sort of push us towards the right direction. And I was reliable. I wasn't like this big all-star kind of guy who would make these huge plays, the interception and returning for a touchdown and all this stuff. I fantasized about being that guy, but I was never that guy. I was just consistent. You know what I'm saying? I made my tackles. I was where I was supposed to be. I was at the spot where I was supposed to be. Bat the ball down. I made a couple interceptions, but I was consistent and reliable, and that went on into my adulthood. And I've said how it came, and as with my mom, who I love, who I was her firstborn child, and I was sort of for my two brothers, I was a sort of brother / uncle. When I was there, I picked them up from school and after daycare stuff that they had. A lot of my friends, we'd stay and play basketball until midnight. You know what I'm saying? I had to go home early, and I would do it. And it just made sense. I didn't fight and argue about it. What's funny is now as an adult, I talk to other people who had a similar upbringing, and they talk about how much beef they had with mom over it, or how, occasionally they would mess it up on purpose and stuff like that. I never did that. Not once. I say my brothers are 10 years younger than me, so I don't know what time I guess it stopped at 18 when I went to college. It was just my thing. I just did it. If I didn't pick him up, who's going to pick him up? My mom was still at work, blah, blah. It just needed to be done. And I took that on. And I've said, though, that also like how it developed in other ways. It developed with sort of bonds and trauma bonds and things in our family where I was always the fixer. Even if I wasn't in the same city as everyone else, I'd get on a video call and a Zoom to adjudicate like little beefs and things. And this was something I took on, and I had to be me, to be the full person. I had to understand that I had agreed to something that wasn't real. I could not. I agreed to a role about who I was and what it means. And when the phone calls came, when I had to deal with some stuff in the family, like the energy that it brought to me, like my mood would shift, and I'd become very serious, and I'd be trying to do the right thing and this and that. I had to learn to be a disappointment, in order to get to where we are now, which is different, which has changed the entire dynamic in ways that might seem bad. We don't necessarily communicate, my brothers and I do not communicate, but it's like, this is the path of what we're moving through. I know that it will make sense at the end of the day. And I know that at the time, what was going on was not good. And I know that in this moment, everyone's moved and shifted. My mom's in the Caribbean. My brothers are doing their things independently. And we've moved. We're still moving. It still is. But I had to learn to be a disappointment. I know that, the early stages of me asserting myself and saying, I can't handle this stuff in the same way. Mom, I know that was received. She was disappointed. She had to adjust, but that's okay. That I can do that. The key to understanding about why it's important to be a disappointment is that you are the operant power. You received a story about the world. You agreed to that story, particularly as a child. It was easy for you. Your parents and your siblings and friends all agreed to a thing, and you came up and showed up a certain way. And it became a part of you, became a part of your identity. You were reliable this way. You received love this way. You sought for love this way. It made sense. It kind of works in a way, even with the bad parts of it, even with the things that you wished were better. And if you want, as this thing progresses, when you feel moments of, for instance, the people who always show up, Mr. Reliables, you ever notice that sometimes the reliable people, of whom I recognize myself to identify with, the reliable people, sometimes we're complaining. We're like, we feel taken advantage of. We feel like people aren't necessarily there for us. We sometimes feel fearful to even ask for help because our identity is as the giver of the benefit. We don't identify with receiving in the same way. We don't replenish our identities with the receiving part of it. Well, some people do. Some people identify with the receiving. And at some point, if you identify with the giving, and then you keep complaining that people are taking, it is a work for you to do. It is okay to be a disappointment. I'm telling you something that is personal. This is me. I'm still dealing with this. I'm still dealing with this. Like, just to be, it's okay. Like, even with people that I respect and like and cherish and love, like, if someone wants to spend time with me or to visit, or I have to deal with and sit and acknowledge what I want and put that into the equation. I didn't always do that. It was like kind of, I'm the friend. I'm there. I got you. Yo, I'll show up. You need this? Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. And that's good until it's not good. This speaks to the whole from the previous episode. It speaks to the question of being genuine and authentic. It speaks to balance. It speaks to nature. It speaks to balance. It speaks to God. Why? Why does it speak to God? Because there's something about this experience that it is constantly shaping us. We are constantly creating our experiences so that we could sort of, it wants to compel us to notice that we actually have the power here. And it works in really interesting ways. I mean, be a disappointment. You think about it. Look at like Netanyahu, right? Benjamin Netanyahu has a son. He has some children, I believe. Now, what does it mean to be the son of a warmongering, monster, violent, terrorist person? What does it mean? Well, I don't know what it means. Maybe they have dinner. They have their little dinners or events, and he takes the microphone and he takes a bottle of champagne and he says, "Cheers. We're gonna kill Palestinians. Yes, cheers. We're gonna take over Gaza. Why? Because that's the thing that they've agreed on. We're going to take over Lebanon." Whatever Ben Gvir just said, Lebanon must burn. He says he adopts the language of the room. Very similar to what I did. Like, thankfully, my mom's not a monstrous terrorist, right? But his is. And the question for him is he'll have to disappoint if he wants to be engaged with reality, if he wants to be engaged with God, if he wants to join us in a world that is real. that isn't governed by weird nonsense, Zionist propaganda, Zionist Jewish supremacy, the son of Netanyahu will have to be a disappointment at some point. I imagine there's someone in that family who is actually, I don't know, maybe neurodivergent and attuned to the human condition and human rights, and understands that occupation isn't a good thing, and you can't have concentration camps, and you can't kill children, and they understand that killing all these little children is a bad thing. And can you imagine Netanyahu and the rest of the family's like, oh my God, you leftist, you traitor, you're a disappointment. Well, kudos to that person, kudos to that kid who figures that out, becomes a disappointment. I think about in the American context, I read, again, I've talked about Samuel H. Cartwright, this journalist from the 1850s who coined a term, drapetomania. He was a journalist and a medical professional, and he used his clout in both those arenas to coin a term, drapetomania, where he, black people who were not happy with being slaves, who didn't accept the natural biological condition of servitude and enslavement. These Africans who didn't figure that out, they're crazy. The ones who were trying to escape, the ones who were trying to read, the ones who were trying to organize themselves. No, they're suffering from drapetomania. And he'd publish essays about this, and it'd be in the newspapers and the journals, and white Southerners would be like, yes, that's right. And of course, the way you fix drapetomania is to whip and slap and penalize. You have to punish them to remind them. You have to whip drapetomania out of them so that they can become normal again, and to accept everything around them. Well, shout out to the people who were disappointments. Shout out to the slaves who were disappointments. Shout out to Nat Turner and Harriet Tubman. Frederick Douglass. Thousands, countless others. These are just names. These are just the names that I can rattle off right now. Thousands, countless others who resisted and who were disappointments to that setup. That's 1850. Today, there's the Manosphere and all these goofy manifestations of, again, it's just groupthink. This is what I'm talking about. Manifestations of groups getting together, groups giving themselves names and titles, agreeing to things, alpha, beta, sigma, looks maxing, let's be men and smash our faces. Let's be men and I hate women. How can we have sex with women? Right? And then they switch, we hate women. Let's get rid of women altogether. Let's all hang out together, guys. And there's so many young boys who don't know that they need to be a disappointment to that setup. They need to be a disappointment. You are the power, actually. You don't have to agree with the nonsense. It's so funny how it works too. These labels they don't matter in a way. Like as it relates to Iran, MAGA, Trump just signed this deal with Iran. It's already been blown up. Israel jeopardized it again. And now the Democrats are criticizing Trump and say that the war should continue. So it's all like, I grew up when the Democrats being the anti-war party, but it's goofy. That was a story. That's not what was. It's a system. It's a political party. They're jockeying. They are producing contrast. They have their interests. It's not anti-war, actually. Their interest isn't anti-war. Their interest is whatever it is at the moment. And at this moment, the decision makers see benefit in in being pro-war and against Trump, creating that contrast. And so imagine being a staffer in the Democrat Party right now who just kind of just adjust. You see this shift. You see what Nancy Pelosi says. You see what Cory Booker says, and what these guys. This is these marketing ploys and things that they say, and you just kind of, all right. You just start writing it down. You start jumping in as part of it. You have to be a disappointment to that. You have to be a disappointment to that, right? You see why? You can't just do things because your superior does it, because your identity leader does it. You can't just repeat the words that they say and the assumptions that they make. You have to break patterns. You have to break patterns because the patterns aren't real. The expressions in this world are the result of intentions and identities and belief systems. That is what's producing people. So these people believe, they just believe that they are this small thing. They're just a cog. I'm telling you, man, my experience and professionally, I've seen senators, executive producers, people who have huge platforms who identify with the idea that they can't do much. you just it's just an identification. It's just a story. And it reminds me of how I felt when I was first confronted with some of the challenges in my family. Like, I can't do much here. This is really all. This is what I do. This is how this works. This is how this system works, man. I just got to keep doing it, despite all of the angst and all the problems it causes and creates. This all ties into everything we've been talking about identity and about authenticity and about reality and about storytelling. Very quickly, I just want to end it with this interesting story. A couple of years ago, Sheba and I went to the Seychelles in Africa. Had an amazing time with an amazing family, someone who lives there, a friend of Sheba's, their families. And so we got to spend, I think, 2 weeks in the Seychelles. It was beautiful. And there's so many things I could say about it, but this is a one thing, it's something they probably don't even remember it. But one of the first nights we were all sitting in the living room together. We were in this amazing little house on a farm in the Seychelles. It was beautiful. And we just had this conversation about, it just felt magical, right? And we had this conversation about life very quickly. Like, people were just it just came up. People were talking about stuff. And for some reason, this sticks out in my head, okay? There's this piece of chicken on the table. We had food, we had drinks, we were just chilling, we were playing some card games, and there's a piece of chicken on the table, the last piece. Everyone's taking some, whether it's the last piece. And somehow we had this conversation about who takes the last piece, right? And we were just talking about how the manifest, like what we're seeing in the world is one thing, but there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath it that we don't know. And that to me is the most powerful and interesting thing. So breaking patterns, being a disappointment here is we're speaking to people who are trained up in perfectionism, who are high accountability people, highly accomplished people who put others before them even, which is all this beautiful instinct. You've built the world up one way and it's great. And it's okay to disappoint. You have to now notice when it's time to disappoint, to reorder your actual energy while your energy is usually dispersed broadly, and you respond to the stimuli and your friends and people in your family. You respond in a very conditioned or consistent pattern that you can just break it, because you have no obligation to be the same person that you were yesterday. You have no obligation. So back to the chicken on the table, right? I was thinking, like, there's so many interesting things. Like, let's say one of the women takes the chicken and grabs it, one of the really shy people, right? We don't realize that for her, that could have been a pivotal pattern changing thing. Someone else could be like, oh my God, it took the last piece. Oh, they want, it's like, you're like, that's not typical of her to do that. But for her, she might be on a path and on a journey where she's realizing that if she wants the chicken, it's her right to take it. If she wants to have something, that she can do it. She doesn't have to always consider the room. She doesn't have to be the person that everyone expects her to be. The kind, considerate person. Even these good gestures. Notice that there are people who don't operate like that at all. They operate completely differently. They expect to have the last piece. They expect you to give them consideration and to give them the last piece. And so we're talking everything from, patterns of genocidal delusion down to, like, politeness at eating and shit like this. But your power comes from recognizing opportunities for contrast, opportunities to break patterns, particularly patterns that don't serve you, that you are the operant power, that the whole concept of being a disappointment is something that many of us grappled with, I grappled with, but that the concept is externally oriented. You are disappointing someone else quite often, and that there are other people who don't even think that way. They see things as what you might call a disappointment. They see it, or disappointing others, they see it as prioritizing self, and that's also valid. It's kind of like with me with certain things. Like I used to call things bragging. I avoided bragging. I avoided talking about my accomplishments and things because I called it bragging. I called it bragging. I did that because it helped me, because I saw a virtue in it, and it helped me to be humble and to stay focused and to stay focused. And I'm not trying to, I saw something negative about something out there and I called it bragging. I said, I don't want to be like that. But then I extended that too deeply. I made that a foundation, and this humility turns into a lack of me engaging with actually who I am. And the thing I call bragging isn't that. It's actually just an engagement with the reality of who I am and what I can do, and being able to assert it confidently because it is. So I've actively, intentionally broken that pattern. And in a number of ways, I've had to disappoint. I've had to disappoint people. I've had to learn where it's okay to disappoint. That actually being a disappointment in the first, you could be, and this is why information and shit, you think you can inform everybody. People can be well informed. They can be well informed. They realize that there's something they need to do, but they're committed to the identity of never disappointing, of being consistent. You have a story that undermines even your own best intuitions, your own best assessment of how you need to move forward. You know what I'm saying? So get ready to be a disappointment. Be prepared to be a disappointment. Get excited about learning when and how to be a disappointment. The opposite, of course, is that some people will need to learn consistency. But if you've done that, if you're one of those people, you're good. You're good. Be a fucking disappointment. Fuck them. Huh? Subscribe to the channel. Be a disappointment, because you've actually reattached to yourself. That's what it is. Your whole story is retuned, where it's back to the self. Anyway, we're gonna continue this more tomorrow, I think. Yeah. How Billy sees it. Subscribe to the channel. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.